If I look unclean and unshaven, that's because I very much am. I'm gonna level with you. I normally try to tidy up before shooting a video because I don't really want everyone on the YouTubes to know that I live like Lenny from The Simpsons.
Please don't tell anyone how I live.
But the more I thought about cleaning, the more I began to notice that this video does not deserve that level of effort. Supremacy MMA is very much the absolute lowest tier of garbage, not just as an MMA game, but as a form of media that exists. Everything it does very poorly. This game fails so much that if it tried to fail, it would succeed. That is the level of sheer suckage that we are dealing with today. As for the sunglasses, I'm wearing them for 3 reasons. The first being so that you cannot see the bags under my eyes. Because they're there, and I'd show you, but it would be terrifying, and you would probably not sleep for months. The second is so you can't tell that I'm reading from a script, because again, effort! And the third is I just think they kinda make me look like Johnny Cage, which hopefully will remind me that good games exist while editing this video. Because after playing Supremacy MMA, I have since forgotten what fun is. It's also a good thing that these don't reflect shit, so you can't see how unkempt my computer setup is. So, I don't know, so pick it apart. It's shit, it's very unclean. Again, effort. This game, this video, it does not deserve the level of effort that I usually put in. You will soon see why. Supremacy MMA came out at a very important time. MMA was in the peak of its popularity, and THQ and Daddy Dana were raking in all the cash. And they were literally the only kids on the block, except for that one time that Electronic Arts came over, and then promptly got kicked out for shitting on the UFC branded carpet.
Let's go back to the early 2000s. The concept of 2 dudes in a struggle for martial conquest was quickly becoming mainstream. You've heard it before. We had UFC on Spike TV, fighters like Randy Couture showing up in major motion pictures. We had an A-Team movie where Rampage Jackson played Mr. T. MMA was huge. Again, you've heard me say that time and time again. And on the gaming front, it was very well represented. Not just by UFC and its line of video games, but in real big boy fighters like Street Fighter 4, Dead or Alive, and of course, who could forget Tekken. But those all played around with the fantasy aspect of mixed martial arts. We pined for something more violent, true to life, and primal. We demanded an MMA game that attempted to capture the brutal, wanton mayhem we were seeing on a monthly basis in the Octagon, complete with head stomps, broken bones, and enough blood to make Sam Raimi squeamish.
And in 2011, we got exactly that, in the form of Supremacy MMA on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. And the idea was great on paper, a mixed martial arts game with simple controls and mechanics, but with the brutality of Mortal Kombat and violence that the UFC titles seemed to lack. It sounded like a match made in heaven. It wasn't. At all.
But in reality, it was forged in the smoldering fires of hell. The disc itself made of Satan's compressed shit. The game was developed by a company called Kung Fu Factory, who are primarily known for porting some of the 3D Mortal Kombat titles to the PSP and Nintendo Wii. And since both of those were actually not terrible, I had some decently high hopes for this game going in.
The issue is, those were ports of games made by another developer. Of course I'm going to enjoy a Wii version of Mortal Kombat since it's just Mortal Kombat on the Wii. This is Kung Fu Factory's attempt at their own fighting game. So, let's see why I consider this the worst MMA game ever made.
For starters, this has arguably the worst roster in any MMA game thus far. Even if you ignore the lack of a recognizable organization for branding, there is only a couple actual licensed fighters, like Jens Pulver, Jerome LeBanner, Mariano Mendoza, and 2 others that we'll get to later. In total, there are 14 fighters before taking into account the DLC. Yeah, making UFC on Dreamcast look like fucking Tenkaichi 3 here. All the marketing was on how violent and hardcore it was, which makes you think that you might be in for something a little closer to a simulation. And what you're getting is exactly the opposite of that. For one, if you think you're getting an MMA game where you can move around and use the ring to your advantage, you are dead wrong. The developers thought it would be a good idea to lock you to a 2D plane, restricting your movement almost entirely. Instead, you have a 3D button, kind of like Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. That's a good sign. It allows you to move on an X-axis, but very, very slowly. It's almost as if they forgot that human beings can move laterally, and just slapped it in at the very last second. And you know that awesome limb system used by, another series? You have a very simple punch, kick, grapple, and counter button. You can string together combos with the punch and kick buttons, but they all feel slow and clunky. And the animations don't look like they should at all. Everything here is on the same level as Undisputed One's front kicks. The grapple button is how you take the fight to the ground. And let me be real honest with you. If UFC on Dreamcast's grappling was bare bones, then this game's is bare fucking marrow. There's no bones here whatsoever. You use the left stick to change position with next to no consequences for being blocked. Granted, this is the one time that strikes actually look relatively painful and look like they cause a lot of damage to the opponent. You can even do knees to the head, which UFC wouldn't incorporate until the following year. The submission battles are where the game really shits the bed though. You start one by pressing A, and then you would think, oh, just like a minigame, catch the mouse, fill up the gates. No, you just waggle the right stick until you win. And I say until you win because if you have even one functioning brain cell, you will never lose any of these. The only time I lost one was on purpose to see what would happen. This is easily, without a doubt, the most brain-dead fucking submission system I have ever seen. Hell, calling it a system is a stretch. It's here because it has to be. It's not very happy to be here. There's no actual mechanic here whatsoever. Just palm fuck your stick until your bar fills up. The issue is, there's no advantage to using them over grounded strikes, as punches from the top are faster, deal way more damage, and since this game lacks things like a stamina system, there is no punishment for just spamming them until your opponent could easily be mistaken for Sloth from the Goonies. Mind you, not that you'll even be able to tell because everybody in this game looks like Sloth from the Goonies. It is fucking ugly. I'm of the mindset that visuals do not make a game good, but they can make a good game better. But this game is just painful to look at. Every fighter looks like they stepped out of a title from 2 console generations prior. This is only a little better than some of the boxing games on PS2, and even then I am not so sure about that claim. This is Xbox 360 and PS3. You'd expect the game to at least look better than games that came out on a system released in 2000. Especially considering this was a full-priced retail release. And the shittiest part of the gameplay is at first glance, it looks actually kind of okay. It looks fine. You try out every fighter and you find that the roster actually has a lot of variety in terms of what martial arts are represented. It takes a fighting game approach where every fighter is designed with a specific tool set that's meant to play into their strengths. The issue is, well, the judo guy's whole thing is throwing people and bringing them to the ground. The wrestler's gimmick is throwing people and bringing them to the ground. The boxer's deal is punching dudes, which is way more effective when you're on the ground. This all sounds logical until you realize that each fighter is identical on the ground in terms of damage. So you have no reason to not just use the ground and pound to win every single fight. This makes it so that despite having a good variety of fighting styles to choose from, the most efficient way to fight is by just pretending to be Mark Coleman. And despite the game saying that a fighter uses a certain style, a lot of characters will have moves in common, kind of like in Budokai. Despite not using that style that move is commonly associated with, and again, for a realistic MMA sim, that might be okay, as a lot of real-world fighters like John Jones will incorporate things like traditional karate, Muay Thai, and even Shaolin Kung Fu into their arsenal. But the issue comes when you look at it as a fighting game. Zangief is a wrestler. He looks like a wrestler. He does things that a wrestler would do, so giving him, say, a Muay Thai style knee from the clinch wouldn't really make sense. His style is based around grabbing and shoving guys' faces into his junk and then doing a spinning pile driver that explodes. That's what we in the biz like to call basic fucking fighting game design. Now there's also a counter system at play here, but just like me circa 2013, it doesn't fucking work. The timing on it is stricter than that one hot math teacher you had in high school, and it's done by pressing block and B.
And care to guess how you block? Well, all of the face buttons are occupied, so you might think maybe the right trigger or back on the D-pad. I mean, that last one isn't ideal, but UFC on the Dreamcast used back to block and it worked okay. Well, it's neither of those. It's up. Like on the analog stick. Let me say that again. Up is block. Even my cat knows that's bullshit. And he's a cat.
Up should be for moving around the cage to get a better position. It shouldn't be block. Down blocks to the body, which also doesn't feel intuitive whatsoever, and many times my caveman brain would default to UFC controls, causing me to take extra shots when I was just trying to move out of the way and play the fucking game. Like, what were they thinking? Making up block.
No other fighting game that I can think of has ever done that. Now, I've taken the liberty to design a tier list of blocking controls for fighting games. In the S tier, we have Street Fighter, Tekken, and King of Fighters. You know, games where you hold back to block. In A tier is button blocking. This is games like Mortal Kombat, Soul Calibur, Smash Bros., Dead or Alive, Virtua Fighter, the other UFC games. It's not my favorite way to block in a fighting game, but it works. You can do it intentionally. In B tier, we have games where blocking is automatic. Now this is rare, and to date, the only game I've played that has it as a core mechanic is a Dragon Ball game on the DS.
And right here, 69 feet below not even being able to fucking defend yourself, is blocking by using your fucking scrotum, and even further below that is Supremacy MMA with its fucking up-to-block bullshit.
I don't think I like this game. I don't think I like it at all.
It's not intuitive whatso-fucking-ever, and half the time you can't even tell if you're blocking in the first place. And don't even get me started on that whole counter system thing that started this entire rant. You cannot pull them off with any degree of confidence. And anytime I do, it's always by sheer luck. Instead of a career mode, you have a story mode. I say story very loosely. I wrote it in the script, it's got quotations around it. It's really just a highly organized arcade ladder with shitty cutscenes thrown between fights. The stories themselves all suck, and everyone swears more than James fucking Rolfe. The stories really are bad though. Cardboard cutouts slide around the screen like this was fucking Persona, and I hate that. I hated it in Budokai 3, and that's actually a good game. Half the time, you just kind of have to guess what's going on. Now what about those other fighters I mentioned before? Well, if you look at the very back of the box, Supremacy MMA very proudly proclaims to be the very first mixed martial arts video game to feature female martial artists.
Yeah, women's MMA is actually awesome, and unlike the WNBA, a lot of female fighters are actually main draws to the point where people will watch them. Even my cat knows this. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that Ronda Rousey was a household name. It's a pretty progressive thing of Kung Fu Factory to include women in the game, and I applaud them for it. And since, I mean, it's on the back of the box, it has to be a big chunk of it, right? It's not. At all.
Two female fighters. We have Felice Herrig and Michelle Gutierrez. I'm sure I butchered that. I'm very sorry, Michelle. Neither one of them look like how they do in real life. They're both rather attractive, but in game they resemble more Marilyn Manson and the ugly stepsister from Shrek than their actual real-world counterparts. But it also does get worse. There was DLC for this putrid pile of shit, because not only were they proud to shell this out for like $50 or $60, they decided, let's make you pay even more. Just in case you wanted shit on shit, you could pay an additional fee for Shane Del Rosario and Bao Quash. I am also certain I butchered that. Unless, because of course there's an unless, you either pre-ordered Supremacy MMA, or you bought it on the PlayStation Vita.
Yeah, this game has the distinct honor of being the sole mixed martial arts game on the PlayStation Vita. Yeah, even my cat knows that was bullshit. Forget porting Undisputed 3 or EA MMA, which would have been rad. Let's put out a dog shit fighting game that sold like 7 copies on a system that even fewer people fucking own. Supremacy MMA is without a shadow of a doubt the worst MMA game ever made. Forget Undisputed 2009, forget UFC 4, hell, forget UFC on Game Boy Color. Because this game takes the cake, shits on the plate, and takes that too. That's why my final score for Supremacy MMA is 5 LJNs out of 5.
See, you might be confused by my scoring system, so let's break it down, shall we? The number is not really all that important. The important part of my scoring system is the thing itself. For example, Fire Emblem was 3 dominatrix mommies, meaning that I can equate the experience that game gave me to being whipped and stepped on by 3 muscle-bound bombshells. Kirby was 5 golden retriever puppies, meaning it gives me the same amount of joy as being swarmed by the cutest version of the cutest animal on the entire goddamn planet. But 5 LJNs? Well shit, 5 sounds good! But no, it's not. Because 1 LJN was a travesty, and 5 is a fucking nightmare. This game feels like it is exactly the kind of shit LJN would publish if they were still around. Just zero effort on all fronts. Next to no real mechanical depth to speak of, ugly, muddy visuals, and some of the absolute worst butt rock music I have ever fucking heard. I would rather have Joe Rogan break into my house and use my toilet after binge eating elk meat and washing it down with a cocktail of gin and Metamucil, and then having to clean that up myself with a fucking toothbrush, than have to play this game ever again. And if you need further motivation to not play this game, it even tells you not to try it at home. They don't mean the moves, the head stomps, whatever. They mean the game. Do not try it at home. Do not try it outside of home. Do not try it, period. Because having a dude stomp on your knee would probably be far less painful. I won't even conclude this review by saying fuck this game, because this game is unfuckable. Just don't play it. Or better yet, don't even buy it out of morbid curiosity. And considering that it sold very poorly, most of the human population chose that last option.